Hello, everyone. I'm Montoya Barker, Special Collections Librarian for the Indianapolis Special Collections Room at Central Library. Tonight, we're joined by Jyoti Verderame with the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis. Our program will focus on education in Indianapolis, highlighted by the contributions of Fredonia Allen, Mary Ellen Cable, and Violet Temple Lewis. Please use the chat throughout the presentation to ask questions or leave comments for our speaker, and we'll answer your questions at the end of the presentation. Tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome Jyoti Verderame with the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis. Jyoti, can you hear me?
Yes, I
You're,
can.
you're all set.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. As Montoya mentioned, my name is Jyoti Verderame. I'm an editor at the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis, which is a web-based knowledge platform. I've left our URL on this slide for everyone to see. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have a master's in chemistry from Purdue, Indianapolis. I also have a master's in U.S. history from Indiana University in Indianapolis. I've been with the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis for 5 years now, and it's been a pleasure working with everyone on my team. So I would like to thank those people. Firstly, our editor-in-chief, Dr. Benjamin Looker, our manager of e-resources and archives, Mike Williams, my web editor, Jessica Fisher, our CEO at the Indianapolis Public Library, Gregory Hill, and everybody else at the library, especially Montoya Barker, tonight's host at the Special Collections Room. I want to plug something special that the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis is working on right now. We're working on a project called Expanding Our Story. It's about community and belonging in greater Indianapolis. And we've been fortunate to receive a Clues Foundation grant, which is enabling us to write 24 entries, 3 special features, which are highly interactive, 3 timelines, and 9 study guides for the 4th, 7th, and 10th grades about 3 underrepresented communities, and those are the disability, Latin, and LGBTQ plus communities. Through this grant, all of us are able to collaborate with different content experts within these different communities, and it's also enabled us to collaborate with our colleagues within the Indianapolis Public Library system. I want to tell you a little bit about the encyclopedia if none of you, or if some of you aren't familiar with our website. We started as a print copy of the encyclopedia, and currently we are a web-based platform, and we have over 2,000 pieces of content about the history of Indianapolis, as well as the counties surrounding Marion County and the metropolitan statistical area. 3 of the entries I'm going to talk about tonight are about the women who Montoya mentioned: Fredonia Allen, Mary Ellen Cable, and Violet Temple Lewis. So I'll go ahead and start. Fredonia Allen was an Indianapolis educator and businesswoman. She was born here in Indianapolis on July 27th, 1859. Her parents were Henry and Ann Tudor Allen. Fredonia attended Indianapolis public schools, and she also attended the University of Chicago for 1 quarter, and that was in 1897. She was quite a remarkable woman. She wanted to increase her knowledge, so she attended Cornell University, and she received an undergraduate degree in philosophy in 1900. From there, Fredonia came back to Indianapolis after teaching for a short period in Paris. When she was in Indianapolis, she taught at Indianapolis High School, which later became known as Shortridge High School. She was only at these 2 locations for 1 year, and then she took a position at the Girls Classical School in 1901 as the headmistress. Now, that school is a very special school in Indianapolis's history. It was founded by May Wright Sewell, who served as the principal at that school. The Girls Classical School was like a counterpoint to the Boys Classical School, which was across the street. May Wright Sewell was known for her work in women's rights. She was a suffragist, but she was also an educator and a lecturer. And when she opened her school in 1882, she wanted to provide young women in Indianapolis with an education that highlighted more than their accomplishments. And what I mean by that is that at this time in history, women were valued for their musical talent or their ability to draw or their home management skills. But May Wright Sewell wanted to provide a place where women could actually study rigorously. While Fredonia Allen was the headmistress at this school, she got an idea that as a student at one of those universities that May Wright Sewell was hoping her students would eventually attend, well, Fredonia Allen thought, well, I can have my own school also. I don't need to stay here. So indeed, that's what she did. She left the classical school and formed her own school, which was Tudor Hall, and she did that in 1902. And there's an image of Tudor Hall, which was at 16th and Meridian Streets, and this is from 1904, a few years after Fredonia Allen opened her school. She named the school Tudor Hall as a memorial to her own mother, Anne Tudor. Now, Fredonia's goal was to bring the East Coast traditions of girls' education and moral pedagogy and cultural development to Indianapolis. And what that meant was that she wanted to have a strong all-female community. She wanted to develop the leadership skills in these young women. And she deliberately broke from the prior female seminary model that focused on domestic arts. And for some of you maybe who attended high school in Indianapolis or maybe even elsewhere, when I was growing up in junior high, everybody had the choice of taking either home ec or industrial arts, and most of the girls gravitated to home ec. My dad forced me to do industrial arts, and I'm glad he did, but domestic arts would have been similar to in home ec. You learned how to cook and you learned how to sew. And while those are good skills to know, Fredonia Allen and her mentor, May Wright Sewell, knew that women could do a lot more than that. And so Fredonia wanted to prepare young women for college. You can tell from the newspaper ad on this slide that Tudor Hall indeed wanted to prepare young women for college. By attending Tudor Hall, young women received a certificate proving that they had gone through a rigorous course of study. And you can see the names of the schools that are highlighted: Smith, Vassar, Wellesley. These are some of the Seven Sisters schools, and these were noted liberal arts universities for young women at that time. And Fredonia Allen's school, Tudor Hall, prepared young women to enter these types of universities. And you can also see from this ad some of the courses that were taught at Tudor Hall. So in order to develop the students properly, Fredonia had to recruit educators who were experts in these subject matters. So she went to the East Coast and she recruited the professors from those universities to come and teach at her school. And her goal was to not only develop the mind, she also wanted to develop the physical fitness of these young ladies. And so what she did was at her school, she made sure that there was a swimming pool available and tennis courts. And then she had an outdoor courtyard at the school, all in order to emphasize to these young women that they were there to take the rigorous coursework, but also to develop their physical fitness. She also made sure that her school had a residence hall, and this was to attract the top students from across the country. She didn't just want students from Indianapolis. She wanted her school to be known across the United States as one of the elite preparatory schools for young women. Even though the school started modestly with only 4 boarding students and 10 day students, by the time Fredonia died on April 27th, 1927, There were 250 students in all, and that's between boarding and day students. And these students were between kindergarten and age 12. So just imagine, I mean, when she started her school in 1902, 25 years later, she expanded it to encompass, 13 grades for young women. And she had 250 students when she first started with 14. I think that's an amazing accomplishment. But Allen wasn't just an educator. She was also a very sharp businesswoman. She developed real estate. So she owned a 3-story apartment building. It was called Allen Apartments, named after her surname. And that was at 17th and Pennsylvania Streets. And she built that in 1913. And based off the people who lived at that apartment building, Josiah K. Lilly Jr. from Eli Lilly, George Maxley, who was the president of an Indianapolis wholesale drug firm, and then Merritt Potter. He was a partner at E.C. Atkins and Company, which was a big firm in Indianapolis. You can tell that these were luxury apartments if her apartment building attracted this type of resident. She also went on to own a 24-unit apartment building, and that was called Lumley Apartments. And this was at 16th and Meridian Street. It was actually within her old school. And this was in 1922. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the name. She called it Lumley Apartments because she was a direct descendant of the Lumley family, which was one of the oldest and most prominent families in northern England. And that was, her heritage was very important to her. And I wanted to share these images with you. So on the left, you see the Allen apartment building. The Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission actually saved this building from demolition in 1986. They cited it as an early example of craftsman style architecture. Unfortunately, the Lumley apartment building, which even though the image is quite grainy, you can still see that it is quite a beautiful structure. And it was not saved. So it was razed in 1976 and a parking lot was placed there. So Allen's legacy survives in the school that she founded. I want to tell you, in February of 1925, Fredonia Allen had eye surgery, and this left her quite weak. So she decided that she was going to recuperate in California at her sister's home. But before she left for California, she wanted to make sure that the school was well taken care of. So what she did was she added more faculty members to the school. She incorporated the school. And then she added a board of trustees who would take care of her school in her absence. Unfortunately, she died before she even got a chance to go to California, but her actions saved the school because that's all she wanted. She wanted to make sure that the school survived long after her passing. And indeed, that is what happened. Now, World War II, the school actually moved to Cold Spring Road to a larger facility. And at that point, there was an all-boys school across the street from Tudor Hall, and that was called the Park School. Eventually, in 1970, Tudor Hall merged with that all-boys school, Park School. And today the school is known as Park Tudor School, and it's for children kindergarten through age 12. And on the right-hand side, you can see the image of the school. It is a beautiful structure, and it's a wonderful testament to what Fredonia Allen strove to attain for the young women in Indianapolis. Furthermore, something that just lives on in her name is ever since 1928, the school has given a scholarship in her name. It's the Fredonia Allen Memorial Scholarship, and it's to a graduating female student. It helps pay for her first year of college. So the next person I want to tell you a little bit about is Mary Ellen Cable. Mary Ellen Cable was also an educator, and she was a civic leader in Indianapolis. She was born in September 19th, 1861 in Leavenworth, Kansas. She was born as Mary Ellen Montgomery. I could not find who her parents were. Um, During this time, Leavenworth was a free state, so the African American population was increasing. Um, but still, I just had some trouble finding out who her parents were. But what is very interesting is that um, she was actually able to graduate from Leavenworth High School, and she attended the Teachers Normal School sometime in the 1870s, right there in Leavenworth. She went on to teach elementary school at Fort Scott, Kansas, and then also in Topeka, Kansas. And that was in 1881. And then that same year, she wound up meeting her husband, George Washington Cable. And she married him. And then they went on to have a son, Theodore Cable, and he was born in 1892. It was shortly after that that the family moved to Indianapolis. Now, George Washington Cable was an educator, so he had a job at a school in Indianapolis for a short period of time, but then he wound up working at a post office. It was Mary Cable's career that took off in Indianapolis. So when they arrived here, she first took a job at School 19. And I want you to kind of bear with me because she moved schools quite a bit until she finally settled down and found a couple of schools where she had long periods of time to really make a mark. But she started off at IPS 19, and this is a school for African American children. Within 5 years, she transferred to Indianapolis Public School 23, and here she taught mathematics. By 1903, Cable took a year-long position at the newly opened Robert Gould IPS School number 40. Within a year, she left and she transferred to the McCoy School, which is IPS 24. And this was to be the principal. And this is where she stayed for almost 20 years. And when she was here, I think through my research, what I found is that a lot of her civic awareness just kind of blossomed. And what she did was she created a garden project for the children at this school, because what she thought was that if children started gardens on the school property, it would give them something to be responsible for, and it would teach them good citizenship and just how to value the earth. And she also hoped that this would encourage people in the nearby Flanner House Homes district to do the same and have community gardens, because she was just really involved in civic activities. And to this point, Mary Ellen Cable worked with the Women's Improvement Club of Indianapolis. So this started in 1903, and it was a club for African American women. And what these women tried to do was reform address some of society's problems, right? And so even though initially they started as a literary club, they expanded their scope to really address the social issues in Indianapolis and do a lot of community outreach work. And one of the areas that they really honed in on was the health care that African Americans were getting in Indianapolis. In the 1910s, almost 1/3 of the African Americans in Marion County had tuberculosis. And this was really seen in the school system. So she worked together with the Women's Improvement Club of Indianapolis to address this problem. And since she was at IPS 24, what she did was she started one of the first fresh air classrooms for Black students at the McCoy School. And bringing the fresh air concept to IPS 24 was very important. And I want to tell you a little bit about the fresh air schools, because you may be wondering, what does this mean? Well, the fresh air movement was brought to the United States from Germany, actually. And what medical uh, doctors and teachers thought was that if students were ill, if you taught them outside, then you wouldn't have all of the different germs spreading within a confined room. And so children would learn better and their health would improve that way as well. So this movement came to America and eventually it came to Indianapolis. And the Marion County Tuberculosis Society and the Board of School Commissioners worked together, and they agreed that Indianapolis schools needed to either have one of three different types of fresh air concepts. One type was to have just classrooms within a school, so dedicated classrooms where windows were opened throughout the day. And sometimes the schoolrooms could get really cold, 50, 60 degrees. Another type of fresh air class would have a muslin window, which is more like a mesh within the window. So even though the window wouldn't be completely opened, you would still have some of the cold air coming into the classroom. And this was still very beneficial to the kids because you had fresh air flowing into the classrooms. Or you could have school conducted completely outside. Indianapolis never had schools like that. Indianapolis had one of the other two types. Either windows were left completely opened or muslin windows were put into the window sills. So what Mary Ellen Cable did was she was able to bring the idea to IPS 24, and there were three classrooms that actually were dedicated to the fresh air concept. And this was done in 1917. And I have a list here of the IPS schools that used this fresh air concept. So IPS 3, which was a school for white children, they started it in 1913. And then you can see IPS 74 had a classroom in 1914, then IPS 12 in 1917. Then it was IPS 24. That was the first school for Black children to have this. And it was groundbreaking. IPS 22, another school for white children, used that concept. And then again in 1929, IPS 26. IPS 26 was another school for African American children. And the concept worked. Nurses were on staff at these schools. They took data and they showed through their data that children actually did get healthy and their academic performance improved. So Mary Ellen Cable was really onto something here. Cable ended her career at IPS 4, so she moved again. And she was principal here for 11 years. Now, something creative that she started here was student councils. And again, all of us have gone to school, so we've heard about student councils. But this was something pretty innovative at the time. So she started student councils for children within grades 5 to 8. And she knew that this would teach them leadership skills and how to improve their community, not only the community within the school, but even like outside of the school. And it would also help them communicate with adults because any project that they wanted to implement would have to go through an adult's approval first. So these were just all skills that she wanted children to be able to have before they moved on into high school. So during her 45 career at IPS, Mary Ellen Cable not only served as a teacher, but she was also called a director of practice teaching, and she served in this capacity for 17 years. And she was a principal at 5 different schools. So the Board of School Commissioners certified 61 educators who Mary Ellen Cable trained through her job as the director of practice teaching. And 5 of those 61 went on to become principals, just like she was. And this is an image of public school number 4, which is where Mary Ellen Cable finished her career. So as I had mentioned earlier, Mary Ellen Cable was civically involved And some of this included presidency of the Colored Women's Civic Club. She also helped to organize Indianapolis's chapter of the NAACP, and this was the westernmost chapter of the NAACP at the time. She was also a member of Bethel AME Church, the Browning Literary Society, and the Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. And Cable died on September 18th, 1944. But her legacy endures at the location of the former IPS School Number 4. In 1953, a new IPS 4 was built, and it was built just adjacent to the former school. And the new school was dedicated to Mary Ellen Cable. The school unfortunately closed in 1980 due to underuse. And this was even after, in 1971, when there was a system-wide, IPS system-wide effort to desegregate the schools. So after 1971, students were moved from Mary Ellen Cable, African-American students were moved from Mary Ellen Cable to schools with white children, and some white children were moved to IPS 4. But even through all of this shuffling, this particular school just lost enrollment. But from 1980 to 1986, IUPUI, which is now separated into two separate universities, at that time, IUPUI wound up renting the Mary Ellen Cable School for its Department of Speech, Theater, and Communication. IUPUI wound up buying the school in 86, and they renamed it the Cable Building. And I actually took a speech class there when I was in college. So I'm glad I was able to experience that there. The school was demolished, though, in 2006. But as you can see from the image on the right-hand side, there is a historical marker on that site, and that was erected in 2007. And it commemorates the school as being one of the first Black schools for African-American students in Indianapolis. So the last woman I would like to talk about tonight is Violet Temple Lewis. So Violet Temple Lewis was an Indianapolis educator and businesswoman. She was born in Lima, Ohio on May 27th, 1897 to William David Harrison and Eva Brown Harrison. And she wound up graduating from, I think I'm mispronouncing it, Lima High School in 1915. So what she did was she went to a secretarial program at Wilberforce University. And Wilberforce is known as being a historically Black university in Ohio. And secretarial work is very important at this time in history because it is becoming a very professionalized field for women. And it's just a new vocational track for women to enter. So after Violet graduated from Wilberforce, she took a job at Selma University, which is also a historically Black college in Alabama. And when she was here, she noticed a lack of secretarial courses that were offered at this university. So she was a very bold woman and outspoken. So she just went to the president and asked if she could teach some classes. And the university told her she could do that. So she started a course on secretarial skills. And this was only for a year. But again, I want to go back to why these courses were so important. At the early part of the 20th century, industry is booming, and we have this massive bureaucracy within each of the industries. And there's a demand for office workers, and these office workers need to know shorthand and typewriter skills. And so Violet Temple Lewis kind of tapped into that by going to secretarial school herself, and then also by starting these classes at Selma University. Well, within a year, she wound up leaving Alabama, and she comes to Indianapolis. She wanted to be closer to her family, who is still in Ohio. And when she was in Indianapolis, she took a job as a bookkeeper at the Madam C.J. Walker Company. And that's along Indiana Avenue. And while she was here in Indianapolis, within a year, she met Thomas Garfield Lewis, and they have two children, Phyllis and Marjorie. Now, interestingly, Thomas Lewis, he's kind of a handyman. He is a painter. He does a lot of just house work for people, but he's also an aspiring musician, which is going to be important um, when I tell you something a little bit later about Violet Temple Lewis. So, also in 1920, she wound up leaving the Walker Company, that bookkeeper job that she had, and she took a job at the Indianapolis Recorder. And the Indianapolis Recorder is is a very important place to work at this. Today, it is the nation's fourth oldest African American newspaper still in publication. It started in 1895. But what she noticed when she was at the Walker Company and at the Recorder is that, again, there's this dearth of Black female secretaries because, she sees that there is an economic opportunity for young women who enter the secretarial field. And if you are economically stable, you're independent. And also, it's uplifting to be in this professionalized field of work, no matter if you are a white woman or a Black woman. Secretarial work at this time was valued. So she winds up leaving the Recorder in 1927, and she took a job with C. Ferguson. Now, he's a businessman along Indiana Avenue. And C. Ferguson, he's a leader in the African American community. He and his brother, they are well known in the entertainment business. And I didn't find any connection between Lewis's husband, the aspiring musician, and C. Ferguson, but I'm not sure that there isn't one because it's just interesting how she met C. Ferguson. I'm still curious to find that out. But anyway, she went to work for C. Ferguson, and she's working in one of his storefronts. And she got an idea. She pitches her idea to start her own business school. And he likes the idea. And she says, yeah, but I need some place to put this school. So he told her, you can use my storefront for 3 months, but then, and I'll give it to you rent free, but then you need to have established yourself and start paying rent. So I'm going to go back to this slide because I do want to point out on the right-hand side, you can see this is the storefront where she opens her school, and her name is there, the Lewis Business College. So she started this business school in Indianapolis in C. Ferguson's storefront in January of 1928. And it is arguably Indianapolis's first Black institution for higher education. Unfortunately, she could not generate enough students to take her classes. So she had to leave the storefront, and she moved the entire school into her house. And remember, she's married and she has 2 children, but yet she brings the school into her home because she's not going to give up just because she can't use Ferguson's store. So in the meantime, she still has to work and she needs a day job. So she took a job as a stenographer at the General Assembly, and that was in 1930. And she becomes the first Black female stenographer at the General Assembly. She was able to increase enrollment at her school, which is still in her house, because she gets this idea. She says, I can barter tuition by giving these students childcare and meals. And so that's what she does. But she's constantly looking for ways to boost enrollment at her school. And so she starts a radio program in 1932, as if she already doesn't have enough to do. And you can see from the ad at the bottom of the screen in the Indianapolis Times, her radio show is called the Negro Melody Hour. And it was on WKBF at 5:30 p.m. And again, she is arguably the first Black female radio announcer in Indiana. She just really puts herself out there, and doesn't seem to think that, she doesn't have a skill set. She just learns something and runs with it. So she was able to increase enrollment at her school. She could move her school out of her house, and she got back into C. Ferguson's storefront. And you can see from the image, this is the fifth graduating class of the Lewis Business College, and this is from 1933. Now, Lewis went on to own numerous businesses in Indianapolis. She had a nut shop, an ice cream parlor, a letter shop. And what she did was she hired graduates from her business school to work at each of these enterprises. And this was to give them practical experience. So by 1938, Lewis was able to open a branch of her college in Detroit. And the school blossomed in Detroit because of the auto industry. And again, they need secretaries at all of these new automobile companies. And 2 years later, in 1940, Lewis closed the Indianapolis school, but not before the school was accredited as a junior college. Lewis was able to expand the school to Cleveland, Ohio. And you can see from the image on the top, this was the Lewis Business College in Detroit in 1976. And then it eventually moved to a larger location on the northwest side of Detroit. This was another image. She had numerous locations of her school in Detroit. It was really just blossoming in Detroit because of the automotive industry. Now, even though she closed the branch in Cleveland in 1978, the two schools merged. The Cleveland branch and the Detroit branch. Now, even though Lewis died in 1958, her university, Wilberforce, gave her an honorary doctorate. And her legacy survives in the school she built. So in 1987, the Lewis College of Business was officially designated a historic Black university. And even though it closed in 2015, it was resurrected 7 years later. And this image on the right-hand side is the school. It's named after her. Today it's called the Pensole Lewis College of Business and Design. The school has expanded. It is not just a business school, it's also like an art school as well. But it sits right on the Detroit River. And it's just a lovely testament to everything that Lewis did. So I want to kind of pull all three of these women together so that it doesn't seem like I'm just telling you about three distinct individuals. Each of these women found creative ways to provide educational opportunities to their target demographics, right? Whether it was college-bound women for Fredonia Allen, or elementary-aged children and their teachers for Mary Ellen Cable, or business school women in Indianapolis, and that was for Violet Temple Lewis. Each of them had to form programs of their own. Allen founded her own school, and she brought this East Coast way of educating young women to the Midwest. Cable, she established student councils to teach children about leadership, and she instructed women who wanted to become teachers and principals. She also started the first fresh air schools, or fresh air classrooms, at IPS 24. And then Lewis, she organized her own business school to fill the need for Black secretaries. And I would have to say, like, the through line for all three of these women is that they provided more than just educational opportunities to the people impacted by their work. Allen fostered an appreciation for physical activity through the tennis courts, the swimming pool, and the recreational grounds at Tudor Hall, right? And I think that this was important because young women at her school got to experience physical activity before Title IX even gave them the right to participate in sports. And Cable taught children leadership skills through the gardens and through the student councils. And these were leadership skills that they might get to use later during the civil rights movement. And then as far as Lewis, she helped professionalize secretarial work. And she set an example of what female business ownership could look like. So I hope all of you have learned something tonight from this. I'm really honored that all of you have taken the time to spend this evening with me and learn about these remarkable women. And please remember to visit the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis website to learn a little bit more about other people, places, organizations, events, and topics that have contributed to the story of our city. And again, our URL is right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti, and thank you to everyone for taking time out of your evening to join us.